where does augmented reality or mobile journalism come into play with like larger global mental health problems?
I think more broadly, what are we all craving right now? We're all incredibly lonely. We're all craving community and human interactions post-COVID. Those products and services that bring us together initially online, but then eventually offline in terms of retreats, events, festivals, bringing community together. I think that's the most exciting space that we're at right now.
Yeah.
And media companies that realize that and that are doing storytelling online to then create offline community are having real impact on the mental health space.
That which you most need to find is found where you least want to look. Welcome to the Sought and Found podcast, your gateway to the world of holistic health and wellness.
In a world of virtual reality, how do we know what's real? Can we future-proof our careers in an unpredictable future? And what does the landscape of mental health look like when we incorporate augmented reality onto our visual field? Welcome to another episode of the Sought and Found podcast. I'm your host, Gareth Catesy, and together we'll explore the realms of holistic health. We like to talk about the mind, body, and spirit, and bring on thought leaders and guests around this topic to empower yourself. And it's also a learning journey for me that I hope you will join me on. Please remember to like and subscribe as this grows our channel. If you leave a comment, it's even better. It's like sending a virtual hug my way. This week we speak to Yusef Omar. Yusef is the co-founder of Scene TV. Scene TV is a multimedia platform that was funded by Snapchat. Each month they receive more than 1 billion views, which is more than every news platform across the entire African continent. And Yusef has a very bright view of the future and how technology will better our lives on all fronts, including the mental and physical health space. So it's a very interesting topic where we explore the positive and the negative side technology might have in the very near and foreseeable future and what that world might just look like. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. It's very interesting to think where we are headed very soon. Enjoy. Okay, welcome to the podcast, Yusef.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming. You're the founder of Scene. Maybe you can just tell us a bit about yourself, your company, give a bit of a backstory to who Yusef is and what you do.
For sure. I wanted to be a foreign correspondent. I wanted to tell stories of wars, natural disasters. Every media organization I spoke to, this was like 2009, so you're too young, don't have enough experience. So I basically gave the industry a middle finger. I started hitchhiking from Durban, where we are right now, to Damascus in Syria. And along that journey across the African continent, I realized that you can create incredibly powerful stories on your own. You don't need a film crew. You can, you be a one-man or one-woman storyteller. Ended up getting stuck in Egypt during the first Arab Spring. But along that journey, I'd found my mojo, my mobile journalism, my ability to shoot, edit, and produce with just a phone, or any small camera for that matter. Ended up getting into traditional media, worked in the newspapers, worked in TV stations. I was at ETV here in South Africa, moved to the Hindustan Times in India, where I trained up a bunch of people how to tell stories with their phones, and eventually ended up at CNN International in London, which I thought was my dream job, but you know how it is. Sometimes what you think is your dreams and what you actually, your experiences, and when you get there, it can be quite different.
Never meet your heroes.
Never meet your heroes. Exactly. Never meet your heroes and never get your dream job. So I get to CNN, and it was like 2016. The Trump elections were happening. Brexit was happening in the UK. These are two big stories, and traditional media totally missed them. Nobody thought Trump was going to win the elections. Nobody thought Brexit was going to happen. And I realized inside these media companies, because they critically lack diversity, right? And if you're not diverse as a media organization, you don't have a finger on the pulse of what's happening on the ground, right? Yeah. So we had a new idea. We said, well, what if we trained communities how to tell their own stories with mobile phones? And what if we curated that content into shows, citizen storytelling, premium quality user-generated content. We shared this idea on stages around the world, and people laughed at us. In fact, the BBC political editor said on stage, I would rather die than do what you do. But people with phones telling stories, that's not journalism. Journalism is about finding things out. So think traditional media had this like kind of knee-jerk reaction is like, we're the sole arbiters of truth. You can't get people on the ground to tell stories. And we didn't listen to them. We did it anyway. We trained up 20,000 people in over 100 countries. My co-founder and I traveled all over the world, Samaya and I. And then COVID hit. Suddenly we couldn't train anybody, couldn't really tell stories anymore. We started developing tools and technology that basically people open up their camera. They're remotely directed through the filmmaking process. They were asked interview questions and prompts, and they're guided. And jump forward to today, we've now published 4,000 videos. We earn millions of dollars in ad revenue from those videos. We've got a team of over 65 people around the world. And I hope we prove some of those folks wrong, that actually citizens telling stories coupled with journalists that are fact-checking and verifying can create something incredibly powerful. Today, we've built what I think is becoming the world's biggest human experience library. We have 7 million subscribers, and every day people come and watch human experiences across various shows. Scene Sex Ed is about sex education. Scene Minds is about mental health. Scene Money is about entrepreneurship. And this is just the very beginning. We're kind of able to expand to so many different verticals of content.
So what is your reach like as opposed to traditional media and news outlets?
Yeah, we do about 1 billion views a year.
Okay, wow.
Which is comparable to many traditional media organizations, significantly more than any media organization here in South Africa, for example. And I think it's because we've been able to crack this idea of like low cost, high volume video content. And funnily enough, like low cost, especially, I mean, you are a classic filmmaker in many respects. You know, we've got this amazing lighting system around us. We look very moody, and this will be very crisp. But we've entered a world on TikTok and Instagram where that aesthetic actually comes across as an ad.
Yeah.
And especially in a world where people feel like they've been manipulated to and lied to, and information is being contrived, what many people are searching for is real, raw content that almost looks like a FaceTime
and
call. Authenticity, right? I think reality is the new quality. And we were very well positioned for that world. Selfie style, people with a mobile phone sharing their lived experience, no BS, was very well positioned for the growth of Snapchat and Instagram Reels and TikTok and YouTube Shorts and these kinds of platforms.
Earlier you spoke about with artificial intelligence, virtual and augmented reality, people are questioning what is misinformation, what is fake news. How does mobile journalism solve that problem?
Right. So we're in a crazy time in history, Gary, where for the first time perhaps ever, you cannot trust your own eyes. As in, you can see footage that looks legitimate, whether it's an explosion taking place in a part of the world or whether it's somebody saying something. And your human eye would not be able to verify whether that individual actually did say that or whether that footage is a deep fake and their lips have been synced to appear as if they're saying something. So that's incredibly scary because it means that we have the potential to be living in very different realities.
Yeah.
And that kind of information can be used to spark wars, to turn people against each other. It's really, really dangerous.
Elections, all sorts of stuff.
Elections can be manipulated, and it's very difficult to control as well. It's very, very difficult to control. You know, it's so easy to spawn new social media accounts and flood social media timelines with false information. And the volume of it is going to be incredible. AI enables an individual to publish thousands, tens of thousands of different videos every single day.
Yeah.
Very hard to police. In fact, I think it's almost impossible to police. I think we just need to build more media literacy so people are more critical of the things that they read. And I think you've always been very good in that space. Now, how does mobile journalism help? I think in this world where there's a shitstorm of fake information, people are going to further lean into real humans that we can verify are real in real locations, and we can triangulate that they really are there. Look at that individual's track record, see how they've engaged in the past and whether they are bad actors or whether they've published factually accurate information in the past, or whether they can verify their credibility. And I think at scale, that is very valuable. If you take a place like Gaza today, you could lean in on one source, like the IDF, and the journalists that are embedded with the IDF, right? CNN and all these organizations. And that's a very small pool. Or on the other side, you've got thousands, tens of thousands of young people with mobile phones sharing their lived experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's an example of where the mobile journalism has been so valuable. It's been so important, not just in terms of democratizing media, but being able to say, okay, fine, you could say one person is lying, but I've got 10,000 people here all telling the same story.
Yeah.
I often give the example of if there was a fire taking place right now in this building, would I trust one professional camera filming that fire, which could easily be manipulated with AI?
Yeah.
Or would I trust 1,000 people with their mobile phones all plugged into the same fire?
Yeah.
Probably more likely, it's probably much more difficult to manipulate 1,000 phones.
Yeah, it's scary, like, to start to question what is reality, and our phones certainly, like it shapes how we view things. So yeah, that collective thing of like everyone pointing the phone in one direction, it's hard to manipulate. I wanted to
Just on your point on what is reality, like, at least right now, what we can all agree on is if we go outside, to relative accuracy, we can kind of agree that it's a sunny day or a rainy day, right? Forget cameras, forget video, just our lived experience.
Yes.
We are increasingly moving into a world where even that reality will be manipulated.
Yes.
Because we're moving to a world where we're moving from phones to wearable headsets as our primary input to technology. When that happens, reality goes completely out the window, because I could walk around and see poverty and you could choose not to. That's a crazy world that we're heading into, where we actually live in different realities.
So where for people that don't understand what is augmented reality, and where do you see it going in the next year to 2030 or immediate future,
So the main language that most people are probably familiar with is virtual reality, right? And as part of that, the metaverse. And that idea, for the most part, people have laughed at best, right? The idea that you put on a virtual reality headset and you are in a different world. You are playing poker in space with a dinosaur.
Yeah, having a virtual bra or something.
A virtual bra. and Mark Zuckerberg and Meta have been pushing this language very hard. And for the most part, it's either been seen as like quite dystopian or just quite gimmicky. And I've owned many virtual reality headsets in my life, and there was a time when I really liked them. I even tried living in a virtual reality headset once for a whole week. I'm talking eating, sleeping, shitting, looking after my kid. I spent a whole week wearing a headset.
No way.
Yeah, and it sucked. Because who wants to live inside of a computer?
Yeah. But it's because you're in a computer. So when does that?
Yeah. But even then, like and I especially after I had a kid, I actually sold all my VR headsets. I currently don't own any. I spend my 9 to 5 on a computer. When I get home, I want to be as present as possible.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's virtual reality. Augmented reality is very different. Augmented reality is not virtual reality. It's augmenting the internet onto the existing world. So saying, how do we enhance the current world with a layer of information that doesn't currently exist?
Yeah.
And it's already integrated into our lives. Every single person who is watching or listening to this right now is already using augmented reality, even if they don't realize it. Every time you open up your phone and you use a Snapchat face lens or a filter on Instagram that makes you look pretty or gives you a doggy tongue or a flower crown, that is augmented reality, because you're augmenting graphics onto your face. In a more commercial application, opening your phone and being able to see for IKEA furniture, like a table or chair, to see what your house will look like, or augmenting a paint onto the walls, that's also augmented reality. So that's now more of a utility focus.
Yeah.
So it's one of these technologies that's kind of like creeped into our lives through creativity and self-expression, but is now taking on more utility focus. And the bigger idea here is actually a shift from what is currently the keyboard as the primary inputs technology, where you type on Google to find something, you type on YouTube to find something, to the camera becoming the primary inputs technology. So the camera not being used as a recording device, but being used as a device to actually input technology. And I'm seeing it a lot in South Africa. Here, I'm seeing post-COVID, all of the menus, you scan a QR code.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? We already had QR codes for years. COVID kind of accelerated the adoption of touch-free QR codes. And that trend is happening more and more. This idea that camera, and it's a really exciting future. Because to be honest, like the keyboard is not a fast way of engaging with technology.
Yeah.
The camera is much faster. Now, of course, today, augmented reality lives on a mobile phone. By 2030, it moves from the phone in your pocket on your hands to devices on your face. So like I've been wearing for like 10 years wearable AR units. This is an example of one, right? And you put it on and you literally have information overlaid onto the world. I can go for a run and have a zombie chasing me, augmented onto the real world.
Oh, wow.
I could look in the fridge and see the ingredients, and it could suggest things that I can make with those.
Okay.
And that's what I mean by like, it's not a virtual world. It's augmenting information onto the existing world. And people think about that, and they're like, oh my God, that sounds awful. I'm sure you'll probably, I mean, I know you, Gary, you're somebody who has a love and hate relationship with technology.
Yeah, I've got my fears of being fully plugged in.
Right. So I
guess my fears is also partly when it makes the transition from wearable to implanted.
Yes. On the wearable,
You don't have the option to put it off. That's my fear.
On the wearable front, I mean, people watch this and probably think, oh my God, like that sounds so overwhelming. Sounds like a casino on my face of like notifications and buzzes.
And pop-up ads.
And pop-up ads.
Yeah.
And it definitely has the capability to do that. But I would argue that the mobile phone is quite overwhelming and selfish.
For sure.
Right? I spend it's impacting my posture on some level. And here, I don't see cities that I walk through. I see my phone looking at cities that I walk through. I don't even see my own child being born. When my child was being born, I was looking at a phone looking at the child. So this has robbed us. If anything, I think if it's subtle, useful information when we need it most, it could be a beautiful way to interact with technology.
It makes sense because the screen almost like blocks you from experience. It detaches you. I can feel it when I film something on my camera. There's like a detachment because I'm looking at something through a little screen, or you're looking where your framing is. Where like with the wearable thing, you aren't worried about framing.
Exactly.
Worried about.
And more to that, imagine like those times where you weren't searching for information, but you were presented with it because at the combination of this AR and AI, it felt it was valuable for you. So, Gary's driving down KZN, gets a little piece of messaging, say, hey, mate, the surf's really great. And I don't know if you know this, but there's a really great little spot and you can access the beach over here if you, like that's useful. And you'd be like, okay, sweet. Like, let me turn off on this exit. Like, thank you that information is so epic. And then you get to the beach and maybe without you having to even make that decision, it can identify for you where the rip currents are. That bit's a little bit dangerous, but actually most of the guys that surf here tend to surf on this spot. So keep an eye out for this area. Like, that's all really useful information. And then maybe on top of that, it'll be like, oh, and by the way, there was a drone that spotted a shark over there recently, so just be aware of that. And there's some coral on that side. Under you won't see it, but there's a couple of rocks over there, so we're just giving you a heads up.
Yeah.
And then you look up at the sky, and it gives you the weather, and lets you know that it's going to be raining in about 2 hours. So you've got a little gap there.
Yeah.
And the high tide's going to be at this tide, low tide's going to be at this tide, and like suddenly you have such a more informed day. Basically, you're better optimized than ever before.
It's true. Like, you obviously have more information, but I guess one of the fears is that we overloaded with information today, and how much more would that escalate with augmented reality? Because like, are we supposed to take in every bit of information, or maybe just look at a flower for the sake of looking at it without the full description and stuff of the flower, or whatever it might be?
Yeah, the saturation of information. And I think combined with that, I mean, I've seen your prolific bookshelf and you get Yuval Noah's book, Homo Deus.
Yeah.
Which basically portrays us as data.
Yeah, exactly.
Which says, okay,
hard stones and humans.
Yeah, on some level.
Hackable, I think I've heard him say before.
Yeah. The idea that like the technology in AI gets so good that it knows you better than you know yourself. So it just starts to make decisions for you. It just says, go here, go that. Yeah. So on that end of the spectrum, it's not so much to do with the notifications and welcoming information, but it's like your life becomes quite robotic in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's going to be this weird world where some of us are going to lean into this stuff, and then maybe there's going to be this like knee-jerk reaction to like let me go back to no shoes, running on a beach, finding berries. It's gonna be interesting. And the potential for inequality is huge too, right? Like, because you're basically now talking about, we already are slightly robotic. Our phones make us into robots. This is a further extrapolation of that. Now, when you start to move screens on your face, it's basically a computer and the internet 2 centimeters away from your optical nerve. I have more information than you, which effectively, if you don't have them, makes me smarter than you. And that has interesting implications for life.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the principles and purpose of the show, it's a holistic health podcast, so we like to talk about things related to the mind, body, and spirit. How do you think augmented reality might help with the big mental health issues we face in the world today?
I think taking a step back, how does technology, and let's just start with social media, help or hurt?
Yeah, exactly.
We have seen so we have a show called Seen Minds, which is focused on mental health and people sharing their lived experience. We're also doing a lot of work in the space of just empowerment tools for people that are dealing with mental health challenges. We have an initiative called Club Unity, which we do at Snapchat, where we take a bunch of influencers, some of the biggest ones in the world, NBA stars, musicians, and they develop toolkits for young people to deal with and predominantly talk about and normalize their mental health.
Okay.
And I think
like destigmatizing,
right? Like create this environment where celebrities say, if it's okay for me to admit and say I'm not okay, then hopefully it encourages others to do the same.
Yeah.
Right. I think what we find when you look at the research around social media is that it can be incredibly detrimental to mental health, especially when you look at the ability to basically watch other people live lives that appear to be incredible.
Yeah.
And
you're just getting one side of the story.
You're just getting one side. Just seeing that, exactly. And you end up in this world where you say, okay, well, I went to the same school and had the same upbringing as this person, and why is their life so much better than mine and so much more exciting? That type of social media is what is known as like passive consumption.
Yeah.
Passively sitting back, it's a lean back experience. And
like TV.
Yeah, and that can be incredibly detrimental to one's mental health. On the other side, active consumption around social media, and here I'm not referring to bullying, harassment, but more closely connecting with 4 or 5 of your closest friends, can be incredibly healthy for one's relationships and their mental health. And we saw that especially during COVID-19.
Yeah.
The ability to social media to connect us to our loved ones and for people to check in on each other and to have fun and play games and share little moments together. So it really is a double-edged sword, but I think when done right, it can be a real force for good. When I say when done right, let's not assume that the current way that social media operates is the only way that it has to operate.
So I also feel it almost needs to be categorized better, because the initial intent of social media was to be social with your friends.
Yeah.
And it's kind of pulled away to a more marketing and branding tool.
Exactly.
Whether you, your own personal brand identity, it's in a big sense lost the social part. Other than, I just share memes with friends. That's like how I communicate now,
Right, but you share with friends. You are sharing into the inbox more than you are sharing to the public.
Yeah, but I'm still passive.
For sure.
Yeah.
But you're probably, and we're seeing that a lot, by the way. We're seeing the research show that more people on Instagram and Snapchat are sharing to their friends and family than they are sharing to their public story. So that's a big shift. And the internet doesn't have to be the way that we've seen it so far.
Yeah.
Like, a world has been created by Meta and others that are predicated on popularity contests, on likes, on follows, on shares, on views, on like, oh my God, look how big I've gone. But why does that have to be the only internet? There is another internet and a social media where it's like, actually, it is about the chat side of things. It is about the one-to-one relationships.
Yeah.
It's about the group chat. It's about that intimacy. So yeah, I think it's sometimes easy to criticize social media when actually it's like, maybe we should be criticizing specific platforms and the way that they've handled social media as opposed to what it can be and what it should be.
I think like with anything in life, there will be a yin and yang, or there will be some sort of balance. So there will be something that's overwhelmingly positive and something that no one could have seen coming that is at the end of the day the result that's extremely negative. But it's always kind of both.
On the AR side, you asked how AR can assist with mental health and holistic healing. I think there's huge potential here, Gary. One of the things that we're finding is people have become... I'll give you an example of a project we're working on right now. You go off into nature, to a national park or outside, you open up your camera, and through the camera, you see a battle take place between Mother Nature and greed.
Okay.
Physical environment. Mother Nature loses, greed wins. And then there's kind of like, he's a little bit like high. Koala bear rocks up. His name's Albert. And he's like, oh, mate, we got to go and save Mother Nature. And you're guided through the national park, say Kirstenbosch Gardens or whatever it is, and you scan trees and they come to life and they tell you stories like Lord of the Rings, and you learn about the trees. And we get you to a beautiful spot. We take you to a local waterfall. We take you to a local river. We take you to a place where you can truly meditate. What we found is people have lost their connection to land.
Yeah.
And we've also lost our appreciation for nature. We've lost our appreciation for why trees flow the way they do and why their leaves bend and why the roots go down into the ground. And
I think it was something you would have intuitively had to know to survive.
You would have had to know.
Yeah.
And been in awe of on some level.
Yeah, for sure.
I think augmented reality, when you start layering information onto the world, or in this case, natural environments, helps you appreciate that again. It helps you bring you back out into those spaces, helps you reconnect with Mother Nature. And there's something incredibly healing about that.
Yeah. Another one I've seen with, that's more virtual reality. I'm trying to think of the term. It's not shock therapy. It's like exposure therapy.
Yeah.
It's like maybe you have a very specific fear or trauma or something, and you basically relive and overcome that with your virtual reality. I've seen some of that being done. I've also seen there's that other app. I don't know if it's called Headspace, but where you basically go through like a guided visual meditation and stuff. So there's already like big leaps happening, but where does augmented reality or mobile journalism come into play with like larger global mental health problems?
At the end of the day...
Or would it always be like for the individual?
On the individual side, I've seen some cool stuff, right? I've seen the ability to wear glasses like mine, and you have these beautiful meditation sessions where as you breathe, they can hear you breathing, and these elements around you are getting bigger and smaller, and it's really putting you into like a trance-like state without the requirement for a psychedelic or anything to help you reach that space. That's been really interesting. I think more broadly, what are we all craving right now? We're all incredibly lonely. We're all craving community and human interactions post-COVID, especially.
Yeah.
And I think those products and services that bring us together initially online, but then eventually offline in terms of retreats, events, festivals, bringing community together. I think that's the most exciting space that we're at right now.
Yeah.
And media companies that realize that and that are doing storytelling online to then create offline community are having real impact on the mental health space.
And being a journalist and stuff, is there any like times you've struggled with mental health doing the stories some of you do that you guys do? Like what is it like to tell, like I know you've been to war zones and all sorts of stuff, and you guys tell really like deep, sometimes heartbreaking stories that you can't believe is happening in the world. Like what does that toll like on your team sometimes, on yourself?
Yeah. So I was a war journalist. I covered Syria and many different parts of the world. I'd seen some really horrific things. I'd seen probably more dead bodies than some combat soldiers at a very young age, by the age of like 21, 22. At the time, I definitely had the early warning signs of what would be seen as PTSD. I was waking up at night thinking my limbs were gone. I was screaming a lot, and I did nothing about it. I never went for therapy. I went for my first therapy session in my mid-30s.
Yeah.
kind of the bravado of being a journalist was like, if you're not cut out for this unless you can do it. So I just kind of walked it off. But to be honest, the traumatic stuff, today I'm not doing that stuff, and I would never go back to war zones. But the footage that I'm seeing coming out of places around the world, like Gaza, is hitting me more today than it did when I was younger. My tolerance for risk is lower. My empathy is higher now that I've got a child. Yeah, I see my own child in these kids' faces. It hits on a completely different level. I now understand what it is to love your own child, which means when somebody else's is theirs, I can't understand, but it hits way, way, way deeper. Because I don't think I ever loved something that much before.
Yeah.
The team are very young. They're also covering a lot of really traumatic stuff, not just war zones, but also suicide and other kinds of things. And it's difficult on them too. And we're struggling to find the right programs and systems that we can put in place. Like obviously we can, subsidize the cost of therapy and these kinds of things. But it's hard because it's constant. It's not like one moment of trauma and then you're working through it. It's like, okay, this is actually your job to regularly interact with either incredibly triggering footage or helping people tell their stories whose lived experience involves rape, sexual assault, etc. So I don't know what the easy answer to that is.
Yeah. And what sort of, on your guys' show where you chat about mental health and stuff, is it a show for people to share their stories? Is it like creating communities around? Like what is the one function of the show?
Yeah, so we basically have 3 stages at which we will work with somebody. The first is empower. So empower somebody to share their lived experience of the mental health condition they went through or currently going through. And the hope there is that if you empower somebody to share their story, it might inspire somebody else. So imagine the bottom of the funnel now being millions of people watching this video that somebody's being empowered to create. As you move further up the funnel, you move towards engage. So now you've empowered somebody to tell a story. Now engage that audience in a meaningful way. And that might be they watch the episode, a vertical video, they then open up their camera and they might have a series of prompts where they can answer questions or nod their heads or play a game or create a little wellness diary where they can track their own moods over a period of time. So that's like a higher form of engagement with an audience, right? It's like maybe 1 million people watch the episode and then maybe 100,000 people engage with this little prompt.
Okay.
And then at the top of the funnel is experiences. And that's where we're like, okay, we're hosting an event and we're welcoming the mental health community to come there, or we're getting a bunch of domestic violence survivors together to talk about their lived experience. And maybe that's like 1% of the audience.
Okay.
So if you have like 1 million people watch the episode and 100,000 people play the games and engage with these polls and quizzes and surveys, maybe 10,000 people might be interested in showing up for your events and stuff. And I think it's important when whatever mental health activism you're doing, whatever programs that you're creating, to start thinking about these funnels, thinking about funnels in terms of how do you reach the largest amount of people with the message that you're trying to deliver or the education that you're trying to promote. And then how do you funnel smaller and smaller percentages, the most loyal audiences, into more meaningful experiences.
Well, I mean, even if you get 5 people to the meaningful experience, like you don't know who these. You kind of detach from how many people it is. Like you go to a stadium and it's 5,000 people. You're like, oh my God, that's a lot of people, you know.
You forget that exactly. Yeah, I said that to the team recently. We just hit 100,000 subscribers on Instagram. 100,000. It took a long time. And I was like, team, that's the whole of the FNB stadium. I mean, they wouldn't even fit there. And then within there, there's particular humans and faces on each of those seats. And yeah, exactly. The statistics become numbers and you forget these are real humans. So having a meaningful impact on 5 people at a retreat is that's life-saving stuff potentially.
And you never think of the ripple effect of who they personally like impacted from those events.
Absolutely. And that stuff is so hard to measure, but so meaningful.
Yeah. That's one of the problems is we do try. Yeah, everything's measurable, scalable. There's analytics to everything, but a lot of it's like a heart-to-heart conversation, or impacting like an individual could mean the world. I wanted to, like, we've touched on the augmented reality. Let's speak about artificial intelligence. Where do you think, like, what's your views on the benefits to that, the worries we have? Yeah.
I am overwhelmingly excited about augmented artificial intelligence. I'm overwhelmingly excited about artificial intelligence because there are so many things in our lives that are just an absolute pain in the ass. Like, sifting through your email inbox is not a fun task.
Taxes.
No, taxes are not fun. Looking at your, even looking at your calendar and see what appointments you have today is not fun. I'd say there's a lot of stuff in our lives that are just completely not fun and completely arbitrary and are so easy to automate. Like, take away every piece of schlep in my life and just enable me to focus on the creativity and the love and the fun. AI at its best does that. It's even the small things. It's the small things like phoning a restaurant to check if you can get a table. That is a completely arbitrary task that does not have to exist. There is a schedule and there are seats and there is a little AI ping that can just get my reservation in there. Or even more of a degree, how many times are you sitting with your girlfriend on Netflix trying to work out what the hell to watch?
Yeah.
And you spend 2 hours
looking at all the things you've looked at before.
And then maybe you don't even watch anything, just go to bed. AI can solve for that in a wonderful way. It can say, yo, you like surfing and you like filmmaking, just watch this. Trust me, we know you're going to like it. So I'm overwhelmingly excited. I understand the risks. And in their ultimate form, humanoid robots that take us on.
I don't honestly believe anyone can understand the risks.
Fair.
I don't think we can actually, like, even imagine,
you're right,
comprehend where it's going. Like, maybe in our lifetime we can comprehend the risks.
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Yeah, it's moving so fast.
But hopefully there will be some benefits along the way. So what?
I love that. There's going to be some risks, but hopefully there'll be some benefits along the way.
How do you think AI would influence mental health? Maybe in terms of analytics, is it an AI therapist? Is it curating specific tailored programs for an individual at the click of a button? Or do you lose that humane interaction of, whether it's any kind of therapist, whether it's an energy healer or psychologist or psychiatrist or holistic health coach? Like, can AI be involved in those roles or help those kinds of people?
I'm an optimist around technology. And I believe, some people believe that AI is basically going to take on most of the jobs that exist today, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to make the world incredibly productive. So much so that there's going to be a large percentage of humanity that don't need to work.
Yeah.
On one side of that, you can say, okay, well, then those people may lack purpose, may be incredibly bored. On the other side of that, you could say, wow, for the first time in, thousands of years, people are going to have more time to not have to worry about their basic living standards, their accommodation, their shelter, their, housing. That could, in theory, give you a much bigger opportunity to connect with friends, with family, with community again. So there is
I guess we had a taste of it in COVID. First time
switched off.
Where time felt like it slowed down. It always feels like it's speeding up.
But in that case, the isolation caused more mental health issues.
Yes. No, for sure.
Yeah. But it had some mental health positives, right? Because, to your point about time slowing down, COVID really made people check their roles in life.
Yeah.
To Gen
I think
Z,
it was time to actually do some introspection.
yeah. And they came out of it. Some people said, oh, actually, I don't need so much money. I really enjoy my passions and spending time with friends and family, etc. Yeah, I just wonder whether in a world where AI creates an abundance of wealth and
Or would it create like a bigger divide?
potentially a bigger divide, but if it creates enough productivity that even the bottom portion of society don't have to work for their basic living standards to be met, does that enable you to have more times with friends and family and to do the things you love?
It kind of also takes away. Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's like the mundane work that no one wants to do.
Yeah.
Versus like the work that's
Passion drive. Exactly.
Yeah, feel driven and inspired to do. Yeah, like, do you think it has the potential now in the future to benefit like lower income communities or areas without immediate access to technology? Like, how does it get dispersed?
I think your point on inequality is very valid.
Mm.
I do think it's unpredictable too.
Yeah.
We assumed AI was going to come for the blue collar jobs first, or we thought it was going to automate accountants or even accountants and like analytical jobs first. But actually, in many respects, it came for the creatives first.
Yeah.
Before it went for the accountants or the pilots, it actually came for the script writers and the illustrators and the animators.
Yeah.
And those are the ones we thought were safe.
Yeah.
Everyone was like, oh, yeah, but it'll never be able to, be creative and do an illustration. It's like, well, actually, it does a pretty good illustration. It's like, oh, but it'll never be able to write a film script. It's like, well, actually, it can learn a film script pretty quickly. You can teach it your style and it can emulate it. So I do think it's unpredictable in that respect. You know what? What I'm really excited about is this. And this is actually very relevant to you. I have a kid right now, Noah. He's 10 months old. I'm, for the life of me, trying to predict what skills and education I can provide this kid to be relevant in a world that we can't even imagine, where 90% of those jobs don't exist today. So I started to think to myself, well, what jobs really can't be automated? And because everything else can, there's just so much.
That's a term I learned from you, future-proofing.
Yeah, exactly. How do you future-proof
an unpredictable future?
Yeah, well, one of those things that you do is you give the kid the right skills. And the greatest skill that you can give them is the ability to acquire more skills.
Yeah.
Right? The ability to acquire more skills is probably the greatest gift that you can give a kid today. But more specifically, when we were growing up, if you told your parents, say, oh, actually, my job, I want to be the world's best surf instructor.
Yeah.
They'd be like, yeah, that's nice, Gary, but get a proper job first. Mm. Actually, the world that we're heading into, being the world's best surf instructor is bulletproof.
Yeah.
There are certain jobs that will be bloody hard for a humanoid robot or AI to be able to do. Surf instructor, ski instructor, mastering yoga poses, but in a really like high touch way.
I think it's one where you get a deep human experience that's indescribable. Like everyone, there's that saying, only a surfer knows the feeling.
Yes.
Like the AI, well, like how would it communicate that to people that's giving a surf lesson? So it's like these careers in the future that are deeply human, where it's a shared human experience. Maybe those are the ones.
Exactly. And the key word there is experience.
Yeah.
So, and that applies especially to retail. We're seeing it right now, right? Everyone said brick and mortar is going to shut down. And it is. Like, online shopping is happening more and more. It's been slightly slow in South Africa, but it will happen. But malls are not closing, they're changing. A lot of stores are now becoming like board games, or I've seen a lot in the UK, like shopping malls are being turned into like ping pong tables. Like people are like paid to play ping pong. So if you can pivot your business, your skills, your industry, and say, okay, the future is going to be a lot more experiential, that's a really exciting space to move into.
Yeah.
I can tell you just briefly in the context of seeing how we're thinking about that.
Okay.
So, believe it or not, in this like muscly t-shirt, right now here in your studio. We're thinking about building a gym. We are like
Is it a physical?
physical gym.
Okay.
We're really interested in the world's first smart gym. We're interested in the idea of like AI and AR directed fitness. We're interested in restaurants. We're interested in hotels. All of these different industries are going to have, in the same way that Web 2 gave birth to Airbnb, gave birth to Uber, there'll be a whole bunch of new companies that are ready for Web 3 that are hiring.
What is Web3?
Web3, we're thinking about this like augmented world,
Okay.
where we're augmenting information to the world. Web3 also pertains to blockchain and stuff, but in this scenario, I'm talking about this highly immersive and experiential world. There'll be a whole bunch of new companies that will emerge that will be ready for that future. It impacts everything. It changes the way you order food. It changes the way you train for fitness. It changes the kinds of hotels you stay at and the experiences that you have there. Yeah. Those that can imagine and understand that future can start building today, and you have to start building early because the building blocks are quite big to get ready for it.
Yeah. But so how would your how does your gym be different from a normal gym? Like, what is the?
Gotta be careful what I share at this stage, but what I can say is personal training is prohibitively expensive, even for people that are relatively affluent.
Yeah.
Right? You're gonna pay 500 to trying to work it out in rands, 500 to 2,000 rands a session, right? Or between $50 and $100 or $200. But it's actually really good. Like, a personal trainer is the best thing ever. Somebody that pushes you really hard and takes you to the, to your limits of what's possible and motivates you and encourages you. Due to this massive technological revolution that we're seeing around artificial intelligence and augmented reality, there's the potential to generate new smart gyms where you are remotely directed by artificial intelligence in amazing ways.
I feel, like I understand from the personal trainer perspective, but it's also could disengage you from connecting with your own body. It's kind of like the fear I have with like wearables, like something telling me how much sleep I had where I can feel the next morning, or something telling me what diet I should have instead of me tuning into my body and starting to feel what it feels like when I eat I also think, we a bit older, so we come from a time where you didn't have a cell phone
Yeah.
24/7,
Yeah.
where it's a strange concept if you're probably a 12-year-old in high school right now. You're like, what? You didn't...
But even us, we have immense anxiety when we don't have that phone. Like immense. Like
I've gotten quite good at not having it.
But you surf as well, so you.
But I don't have it's as soon as there's other people involved that are like highly dependent on you, like you run a big company.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to switch off.
Or even you have a girlfriend, right? I mean,
yeah,
I expect to be able to get hold of you when she needs to.
I know, but luckily we're both bad on our phones. So it's like, okay, must be present doing something,
How good?
Yeah. No, but yeah.
Yeah, it is a thing. I mean, for me, like taking off in a flight that doesn't have Wi-Fi is an awful experience for me.
Yeah.
To be offline for 12 or more hours and know that when I land, our world could have collapsed.
Yeah.
Is really anxiety inducing. Which is why, I mean, on my side, you talked earlier in this talk about Neuralink and being able to plug the internet directly into your brain.
Yeah.
I'm so in for that.
Really?
I'm so down for it. I'm in. I'd be one of the first few to sign up.
They've got things like this is my partial belief in Neuralink. It's like we will be able to cure depression because of the chemical imbalance in your brain. Now, there is, I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist, and there's obviously a lot of mental health cases where it is a chemical imbalance.
Yes.
For a lot of people, pain and depression can be a big teacher. And if you're able to sit with it and work through it over time, things make you more resilient and stronger. And as you grow, you have the capacity to experience more joy, but also more pain. And it's a part of like human growth and functioning. Now, when you just take away that side because it's hard, it's tough to work through, like, are you missing out something that would have made you a stronger, better person, even though it's terribly hard at the time? I think everyone, if you've gone through, serious depression or bouts of it, and I've certainly had my share, but it's all been massive lessons. But I owed a lot of my like mental and emotional growth to psychedelics. So another interesting one might be to touch on how augmented reality and psychedelics might merge or connect, or might possibly open up people to that.
That's really, really interesting. I'd also love a world where, and I don't know where or if we would reach this, where you could capture the visualizations that somebody has in one of those states.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah.
It's because you described it as indescribable.
Yeah, ineffable is like a common one used.
Yeah, if there's a way to capture that, because I know
already now, that they're already doing a similar thing. I don't know if it was Japan or something, but where the AI is monitoring your brainwaves when people are dreaming, or they're showing pictures of like a horse, and then the AI analyzes the brain scan and it generates an image of the horse. So they were saying like in the very near future you'll be able to record your dreams, which is quite a wild
idea. But it'd be valuable too, because isn't it the worst thing ever when you've learned lessons in that space and you can't remember them either, and that you can't remember them? Like, that something profound has happened, and you want to keep that nugget of information, that lesson learned, that experience felt, but it kind of slips away before you're able to consume it, process it, make sense of it.
I think, well, that's the one part of it, because that would be like your mental and analytical understanding of it, and you could unpack it further if you could record it and reflect it back. But the other side of it is it's a more heart and body felt experience, or something deeper and greater.
Can't
be put into words, or maybe the words just don't exist. Maybe AI could help, like yet. I know Terence McKenna used to speak about the psychedelic space as if if you took a caveman and you teleported them into New York Times Square, and then they got there for 15 minutes, got sent back, and then now like describe your experience, and it's like, oh, well, you know, the words and the context doesn't exist for that person, and maybe it's something with the psychedelic space, although it seems like we've been using them as humans since the dawn of time, and we still haven't quite got the words for it, you know?
Yeah. You've been very early into the space.
Yeah.
You've been promoting the benefits long before I've started to see headlines emerging.
I've just seen it. I don't think it's something for everyone, and I don't think it's always an easy experience, but yeah, like the juice can definitely be worth the squeeze. But like as you were talking, like microdosing is the next, I think probably one of the next big ones. You know, like cannabis was legalized, and now you've got, I'm sure, like psilocybin is one of the next and upcoming ones. And I think
I'm based in
microdosing
Australia,
started
where they
used-
just legalized it for medical purposes.
yeah. So it's yeah, I think that's got an amazing potential to help people. But if you couple that with traditional or alternate or holistic therapy, and then now you've got the potential to bring in augmented reality or AI, you know, like why can it not be, you know, like a holistic approach is like mind, body, spirit, but we've got a fourth or fifth element now, it's technology.
Yeah,
That's
a big part of what you talk about often is guided meditation, right?
Yeah.
And again, like even those things like the personal training experience I gave you is not affordable or accessible to large amounts of humanity.
Yeah.
That's
Here's
what
the pro, yeah.
Yeah, that's what AI and AR does. They have the potential to democratize guided meditation, make it almost free, customize it and tailor it to the individual person's lived experience, have enough data on that person to understand their moods over long periods of time, understand their backstory and personal trauma in a way that an individual therapist or guide wouldn't be able to, because they just wouldn't have that context.
Yeah.
People, and it can be an enormous force for good. Even in as much as like a reminder. Imagine AI that's just able to remind you to touch base with your friend because it knows that that person needs a helping hand right now. How many lives would that save?
Yeah.
Just by the AI being able to pick up enough cues that that person's not okay right now. That, hey, they've been typing in this kind of way. They haven't been going out for a couple of days. They haven't had as many phone calls as they usually have. Like that check-in system could be immensely valuable.
I mean, yeah, it's scary, and I think COVID was a big, maybe shown a big light on mental health, because I think so many people struggled, and it seems to be, I mean, there's all studies done and statistics. It's not diminishing; it's growing. You know, which is quite. It's scary that like the numbers predicted for people with clinical depression or suicide rates, all these things go up. So it's obvious, like, well, not obviously, but like, you know, people are overwhelmed by their emotions and thoughts and the way they feel. So I think any tool that can be used to benefit someone's overall mental and physical well-being is like worth exploring, you know?
It's going to be really interesting when AI becomes so human-like that it's indistinguishable from a person. I forget what
close.
Yeah, it's very close. What do I think they call it the Turing test.
Yeah,
where you can be talking to an AI model and you don't know if it's real or not, or rather it passes as critically underestimating the changes that are about to happen. People that are listening to this or watching this cannot imagine a future without mobile phones.
Yeah.
That is going to happen. In 10 years from now, most people that are watching this will not be using a phone as their primary input technology. It'll be a pair of glasses on their face. In 15 to 20 years from now, most of the jobs that exist today will not exist. 80% of them will not exist. That is hard to imagine. I think people are significantly underestimating the world that we're heading into. And if you underestimate it, there's no way you or your kids can be ready for it. So I really think we need to be studying futurism and technology in the same way that we study math, science, English. Like, we have to know, you can't, it's like building a train track. Nobody builds train tracks to where people live today.